The Zodiac Killer was a ghost. He haunted Northern California in the late 1960s. He killed people, he wore a strange costume, and he sent letters to the newspapers. He taunted the police. He created ciphers for them to solve. He gave himself a name, the Zodiac. He promised more killings. He created an atmosphere of pure terror. Everyone was afraid. They were afraid of a man with a symbol, a circle with a cross through it. The known attacks happened between 1968 and 1969. 5 people died. 2 survived. Then, the confirmed murders stopped. The letters became less frequent. By the mid-1970s, he was mostly silent, and then nothing. He just vanished. The phone calls stopped. The taunts stopped. The killings stopped. The biggest question in one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries isn't who the Zodiac was. It's why he stopped. A killer this bold, this arrogant, this addicted to the spotlight doesn't just retire. Or does he? The silence he left behind is almost as terrifying as the noise he made. It's a void, and people have been trying to fill that void with theories for over 50 years. There is no simple answer. There are just possibilities, each one peeling back a layer of a man who was, in the end, unknowable. The simplest theory is often the most likely. The Zodiac Killer stopped because he died. It's a clean, neat end to a messy story. He could have died in any number of ways. A car crash, a heart attack, a workplace accident. He could have gotten a terminal illness and wasted away his secret dying with him. He might have even taken his own life, a final act of control from a man obsessed with it. This theory explains the sudden and complete stop. Not just the killings, but the letters, too. A man in prison might try to smuggle a letter out. A man who moved away might still follow the news from his old haunting grounds. But a dead man tells no tales. He sends no letters. He commits no crimes. His entire criminal career, his entire persona, would have ceased to exist at the exact moment his life did. Think about the timeline. The last confirmed murder was in October 1969. The letters continued for a few more years, becoming more sporadic. The last letter widely accepted as authentic was in 1974. If he died sometime after that, it would fit perfectly. The engine of terror just ran out of gas because the driver was gone. The problem with this theory is its lack of proof. It's an absence of evidence, not evidence of absence. Without a body, without a name, we can't know. Investigators can't just assume he's dead. The case remains open because he could have lived for another 40 or 50 years. He could have died a week ago. He could still be alive, an old man reading these very words. The idea that he died is compelling because it closes the book. But the book of the Zodiac has never been closed. It remains a chilling possibility that he just grew old, surrounded by a family who never knew what he did on those dark nights so long ago. The tools of modern forensics, like genetic genealogy, could one day solve this. If DNA from the crime scenes is ever matched to a man who has been dead for decades, then we'll have our answer. Until then, it's just a strong guess. Another common theory is that he was caught for something else. He was incarcerated or committed to a mental institution. This happens more often than you'd think in criminal history. A serial offender is committing his crimes and then suddenly gets arrested for a completely unrelated, often minor, offense. A robbery, an assault, a parole violation. He gets sent to prison for 5, 10, 20 years. And just like that, the Zodiac disappears from the streets. This theory is attractive because it accounts for the abrupt stop without requiring his death. Oh, he was alive, but he was caged. He no longer had the freedom to hunt. He couldn't go to Lover's Lane with a gun and a flashlight. He couldn't mail letters without them being screened by prison authorities, which would have exposed him immediately. His world would have shrunk to the size of a prison cell. The grand, terrifying Zodiac would be reduced to a number in a system, his power and control completely stripped away. You can imagine him sitting in that cell. He'd watch the news reports, he'd see the ongoing fear. He'd read the newspaper articles speculating about where he went, and he would know the answer. This might have been a source of private satisfaction for a narcissist like him. He had everyone fooled. They were looking for a free man, but he was already caught. The same logic applies if he were committed to a psychiatric hospital. His behavior might have escalated in his personal life. Perhaps he had a breakdown. A family member or a doctor could have had him committed. In the locked ward of a mental institution, he would be just as powerless to continue his reign of terror as he would be in prison. His letters often had a grandiose, unhinged quality. It's not a huge leap to think his mental state was precarious. But there's a major problem with this theory. Law enforcement has had a list of suspects for decades. They have checked prison and hospital records for these men. Arthur Lee Allen, the most famous suspect, was in and out of custody, but the timelines don't perfectly match his potential Zodiac activity. For any major suspect, investigators have tried to place them in a cell or a hospital bed during the years of Zodiac's silence. They have never found a perfect fit. Of course, the glaring issue is that they might have the wrong suspects. The real Zodiac could have been some anonymous man who got a 10-year sentence for armed robbery in 1975 and was never on the police's radar. His name could be sitting in a dusty file somewhere, completely unconnected to the Zodiac case. The sheer volume of records from that era makes a comprehensive search for an unknown person nearly impossible. So the theory that he was locked up remains plausible. It's a logical explanation for how a monster could be taken off the board not by brilliant detective work, but by dumb luck in the mundane machinery of the justice system. What if he wasn't dead, or in jail? What if he just left? People move all the time for work, for family, for a change of scenery. It's a simple, everyday occurrence. It's also a powerful way to escape a secret life. The Zodiac could have simply packed his bags and moved out of California. He could have gone to another state or even another country. If he moved, the entire dynamic would change. His connection to the Bay Area would be severed. He would no longer be reading the San Francisco Chronicle every morning, the paper he so famously corresponded with. His hunting grounds would be gone. The police he loved to taunt would be 1,000 miles away. The whole game, as he had constructed it, would be over. This could explain the end of the killings. Starting over in a new place is hard. Learning the geography, finding new victim patterns, establishing a new persona, it would be a lot of work. Maybe he didn't have the energy or the inclination to do it all again, or maybe he did. Or this is a darker possibility within this theory. Perhaps he continued to kill in his new home, but he changed his method. He dropped the Zodiac name, the costume, the letters. He became a different kind of killer, one who didn't crave the spotlight. His later crimes would be anonymous, attributed to another unknown offender, or not linked at all. The Zodiac didn't stop killing, he just stopped being the Zodiac. This is hard to prove. Investigators have looked for Zodiac-like crimes in other parts of the country during the years after he vanished, but no definitive links have ever been made. It's all speculation. The biggest argument against this theory is psychological. The Zodiac was an incredible narcissist. His ego was immense. The letters, the ciphers, the media attention, this was the fuel for his fire. Would a man like that really give up his brand? Would he be content with anonymous murders after tasting that level of infamy? It seems unlikely. He didn't just want to kill people. He wanted credit for it. He wanted everyone to know his name, or at least his symbol. To give that up voluntarily seems to go against the very core of his personality as presented in his own writings. He wasn't just a killer, he was a performer, and a performer needs his stage. Moving away meant tearing the stage down. Then, there's the idea that he simply got scared. It's easy to think of a killer like the Zodiac as a fearless monster, a shadowy figure of pure evil. But he was a man, and men feel fear. He might have stopped because he had a close call that showed him just how easily he could be caught. The best evidence for this is the murder of taxi driver Paul Stine in Presidio Heights, San Francisco in October 1969. This was his most brazen crime. It wasn't on a secluded lover's lane. It was in a wealthy, populated neighborhood. And things went wrong for him. After shooting Stine, he was seen by several teenagers across the street, and they called the police. A detailed description went out. Minutes later, two police officers, Donald Folk and Eric Zelms, were responding to the scene. They saw a white man walking down the street, matching the general description. They stopped and asked him if he'd seen anything. He told them he saw a man with a gun running towards the park. The officers, who had mistakenly been told to look for a black suspect by the dispatcher, believed him and drove on. Later, when the description was corrected, Fook realized with a sickening feeling that the man he had spoken to was almost certainly the killer. The Zodiac had come face to face with the police just moments after a murder. He walked away, but it was pure dumb luck. He must have known it. He even bragged about it in his next letter, mocking the police for their incompetence. He wrote, "The police shall never catch me because I have been too clever for them." But this bragging could have been a mask for a deep-seated fear. He had almost been caught. The game was no longer theoretical. The risk was real and immediate. After the Stine murder, his behavior changed. It was his last confirmed killing. The letters continued, but the tone shifted. He became more focused on threats of bombings and other forms of chaos rather than announcing his next one-on-one murder. He was trying to keep the terror alive, but from a safer distance. Maybe the thrill of the hunt was gone, replaced by the cold fear of a prison cell. He had pushed his luck as far as it could go, and he knew it. So he quit while he was ahead. He took his victory and went home, content to live as a legend rather than risk becoming an inmate. This theory paints him not as a supernatural force, but as a fallible human being who understood risk and reward. And after Presidio Heights, the risk had become far too great. Another compelling psychological theory is that he didn't need to kill anymore. he had evolved. For the Zodiac, the murders might have been a means to an end. The end goal wasn't just death, it was fame. It was terror, it was control. The killings were how he got the public's attention. They were the price of admission to the game he wanted to play with the police and the press. In the beginning, he needed to kill to be taken seriously. A letter from a nobody threatening to kill people would be thrown in the trash. But a letter from a man who had already killed, with details only the killer could know, would be printed on the front page. The murders of David Faraday, Betty Lou Jensen, Darlene Ferrin, and Cecilia Shepard were his credentials. The murder of Paul Stine was his masterpiece of urban terror. After that, he had what he wanted. He was a household name. The word Zodiac was synonymous with fear. He had the entire Bay Area in his grip. At that point, maybe the physical act of killing became secondary. It was messy, it was risky, and it was no longer necessary. He could generate just as much fear with a letter threatening to blow up a school bus as he could by actually doing it. The threat was enough. His new game was purely psychological. He could sit at home, safe and sound, and write a letter. He could design a new complex cipher. He could watch the news and see the panic he was causing with just a pen and a piece of paper. This was a different kind of power. It was cleaner, safer, and perhaps even more satisfying for his ego. He wasn't just a murderer, he was a mastermind, a puppeteer pulling the strings of an entire society. He had successfully created a myth. The Zodiac was no longer just a man, it was an idea, a boogeyman. And myths don't need to keep killing to stay alive, they just need to be remembered. By stopping the murders, but continuing to write, he ensured his legend would grow. The mystery of his disappearance became the final chapter of his story, a chapter he wrote by doing nothing at all. He won his war for attention, and then he simply declared victory and retired from the battlefield. The killings were just one phase of his career. The silence was the next. There is also a very mundane, almost disappointingly normal theory. Life simply got in the way. We tend to think of serial killers as one-dimensional monsters who do nothing but plan their next crime. But they often lead double lives, they have jobs, they have families, they have responsibility. The Zodiac was almost certainly a person with a day-to-day existence that had nothing to do with codes and costumes. What if that life took over? What if he fell in love and got married? What if he had a child? Suddenly, he has something to lose. He has a family to protect. The idea of sneaking out at night to commit murder becomes not just risky for him, but for them. A prison sentence would mean leaving his child without a father. The secret life that once felt thrilling now feels like a threat to the normal life he has built. Or maybe it was a new job, a promotion that demanded more of his time and energy. Long hours, travel, more responsibility. He simply no longer had the bandwidth to be the Zodiac. Planning these crimes took time. Stalking victims, making costumes, writing letters, designing ciphers. This was a serious, time-consuming hobby. A demanding career could have squeezed it out of his schedule. This theory is known as the banality of evil. It suggests that monsters are not always monstrous, they can also be ordinary people who do monstrous things. And because they are ordinary, they are subject to the same life changes as the rest of us. It's a chilling thought. The man who terrorized California might have stopped not because of some grand psychological shift or fear of the police, but because he needed to coach his son's Little League team on Saturdays. This theory is impossible to prove, but it feels deeply human. People's priorities change. Their passions fade. Even a passion for murder might not be immune to the pressures of everyday life. The Zodiac may have just not grown up. He found something else to occupy his time, something that didn't involve the risk of life in prison or the death penalty. He put his dark hobby in a box, tucked it away in the attic of his mind, and moved on. He became a husband, a father, a coworker. He became normal. And that might be the most terrifying explanation of all. The idea that a man could commit such horrors and then just fold himself back into society undetected is a profound and disturbing thought. Each of these theories offers a different portrait of the man behind the mask. Was he a victim of random chance, killed in an accident? Was he a common criminal caught for a lesser crime? Was he a coward who got scared after a close call? Was he a master manipulator who knew when to quit? Or was he just a regular guy whose life circumstances changed? The truth is, we don't know because we don't know who he was. The answer to why did he stop is inextricably linked to the answer to who was he. A man who was pathologically obsessed with killing would likely only stop if he died or was incarcerated. A man who was more of a performer, an attention seeker, might have stopped when he felt he had won the game or when the risks became too high. A man who was compartmentalizing his dark urges might have stopped when a new life gave him a reason to. Without a name, without a face, we are left to speculate. The Zodiac Killer's final act of control was his disappearance. He dominated the headlines, he baffled the police, and then he pulled the plug. He left the world with a permanent question mark. He knew that the mystery of his identity and the mystery of his silence would grant him a kind of immortality. People would talk about him forever. They would make movies about him, they would write books and create documentaries. His power did not end with his last victim. It continues to this day in our endless fascination with the puzzle he left behind. He achieved what he set out to do. He created a character that would outlive him, a ghost in the American consciousness. The reason he stopped is the final unreadable page in his twisted story, and maybe that's how he wanted it. The man was gone, but the Zodiac was forever. The silence was his final message, and it was just as effective as any letter he ever sent.